Welcome back to Aviation Alerts. In this video, we'll be going through holding procedures and how to determine which type of entry you'll be using for your hold. So the best tool to learn more about holds and where I'll be pulling all my facts from for this video is in the Instrument Flying Handbook, Chapter 10. So if you want to dig deeper into holds, you can check it out there. But for today, we're going to start off looking at a standard published hold on an instrument approach plate. And you'll see that it gives you your outbound leg course and your inbound leg course. And the purpose of these holds is to basically have you in a specific area so that ATC can give you your next instruction after you've held for a couple laps. So in this example over at Long Beach Airport, we're going to be on the VOR approach, and you could see this published hold here. Like we were just talking about, you can see that the inbound course is going to be a 300 heading while you're pointing towards the VOR. And then once you cross over the VOR, you'll see the flag swap on your VOR instrument from a to a from flag. And that's how you would know that you have just passed over the VOR and that it's time to begin your standard rate turn. On your turn coordinator, that's where your standard rate indication is. So you'll always be using that for instrument flight. And once you finish your 180 left turn, you'll intercept that 120 heading that's published there on the hold. And each leg, per the Instrument Flying Handbook, you're supposed to hold each leg for 1 minute long. So as soon as you're established on that 120 heading, you'll want to start your timer and make sure that the second that you want to start your timer, and once you get to 60 seconds, then you're just going to start another left standard rate turn, 180, and head back inbound on your 300 heading again, and then continue until you hear more from ATC. So now that you know how to continue in the holding pattern, we need to go back and figure out which type of entry you'll be using. There are 3 different entries into the hold: direct, parallel, and teardrop. And depending on the sector you're approaching from, you'll have to decide which entry is appropriate. The easiest method for me to draw out the sectors while flying is to draw out the VOR first on my ForeFlight scratch pad, and then my outbound heading that's published on the plate. So for this approach, the 120 radial. Now it's really important to remember that if you're making right turns in a hold, you're going to be subtracting 70 degrees from your heading to create this holding drawing. And if you're making left turns like seen here in the hold that we're about to simulate, then you're going to be adding 70 degrees from your outbound radial. So just remember, right turns, you're subtracting 70 degrees and drawing that out. And then left turns, you're adding 70 degrees and drawing that out. So in this situation, since we're making left turns, we'll be adding 70 degrees from our outbound radial of 120, and that will get us a 190 heading. We'll draw a line going through both ends of the VOR and label them first 190 degrees. Then I'll check on the heading indicator and check the reciprocal, which looks like 10 degrees. So we'll label that here. Now we've divided up all the sectors, and we just have to label each entry. The smallest sector is always the teardrop, the next largest is parallel, and the biggest sector is always direct. It's important to always make your drawing in reference to northeast, southwest, because now we have to determine which area we're approaching from. So for example, if we're heading direct to the VOR on a 270 heading, we can draw an arrow heading that direction and know that we're coming from the east. This would be a direct entry, since we're within that direct sector. If we're approaching from the north on a heading of 180 towards the VOR, we can draw an arrow that direction and see that it's within the teardrop sector. So we would choose that for our hold. And finally, a little bit more challenging example. If you're on a 015 heading towards the VOR, it's a little tough to tell whether you're on the parallel side or the direct side. But if you take into account this outbound line here, that's 010, and we'd be on a heading 5 degrees right of that line in this scenario, then you could see it would be within the parallel entry sector once we draw our arrow out. So let's go over one more example of a hold and practice drawing it out so you guys can get a full understanding of left turns versus right turns. Like we said earlier, it's really important to remember. I'm going to pull up a plate with a hold that's making right turns. So in this scenario, we're going to take that outbound leg. Here we could see it is 072, and we're going to have to subtract, since we're making left turns, 70 degrees from that 072 heading, and that will give us our next line of 002. So we'll draw that here on the approach plate, and then the reciprocal, if we look at the heading indicator, would be 182. We'll draw that extended line here as well, and then we could label all of our different entries. The largest one here is going to be direct, the next largest sector is parallel, and then finally teardrop is the smallest one here. And there you go. That's it for drawing out the hold entries. It's pretty simple once you practice it a lot. You really just have to remember that method of right turns, subtract, left turns you're going to add, and that's about it. And then you have to understand the direction that you're coming from so that you can put yourself in the correct sector. Now we just have to go over how to do these different types of entries, and it's pretty simple. So let's start with direct entry, which is the simplest of the three. You'll always be heading direct to the VOR, usually around your inbound leg area. So once you hit your VOR or whatever fix you're holding at, then you'll just enter into the hold straight in and start your standard right turn to the right or left, and then continue the hold. Simple as that. The next two are a little more complicated. Now for the parallel hold, it's a little bit more complicated than the direct, but this one is pretty straightforward. So you'll be heading towards your fix from the parallel sector. Once you hit your fix, you'll want to intercept that outbound leg and fly that outbound leg for exactly 1 minute. So make sure you start your timer as soon as you cross the fix. After a minute's up, then you're going to start your left or right turn, always into the hold. So it depends on your direction of the hold. All the holds will vary. But in this picture here, this example, you're making your left turn. It just has to be more than 180 degrees so that you come back inbound, re-intercept your inbound line towards the VOR, and then you can start your holding pattern after you cross the VOR again. So I like to pick 225 degrees once I'm starting my left turn after the timer is up, because it's pretty easy to see that on the heading indicator, what heading I have to turn to. I just look down in the bottom left of the heading indicator for that 225 degree tick, and then I find whatever heading that is, and then I start my standard left turn right towards that. Then I'll just hold that until I intercept my inbound course again, and then fly that inbound course until I hit the VOR. Finally, we have the teardrop entry, which is the toughest of the three in my opinion, but not too complicated once you get the hang of it. So once you cross over your fix, coming from the teardrop sector, you'll have to turn 30 degrees into the hold and hold that heading. So for example, if your outbound leg is 09 or 0, you'll want to turn, if it's right, remember, you subtract, so you'll want to turn to 060 and fly that outbound for 1 minute, and after that minute's up, start your standard rate turn to the right back to intercept your original inbound leg course. And that's pretty much it for the teardrop. So that's it for holding patterns, and I know these can be pretty difficult. It took me a while to understand, but really once you get up and start flying them, things start to click. So definitely just start practicing in the air, and you'll slowly become a master at it. But that's all I wanted to go over in the video. Appreciate everybody who watched. Peace.